You know, there's one experience I had in South Africa that I still can't believe I lived through. It was supposed to be a thrilling adventure, shark cage diving off the coast of Gansby. I had always been fascinated by great white sharks, and this seemed like the perfect way to see them up close. Little did I know it would turn into one of the most harrowing moments of my life. It started off like any other adventure. I signed up with a reputable tour company and joined a small group of fellow thrill-seekers. We boarded a sturdy boat that took us out to Shark Alley, a famous spot teeming with great whites. The crew gave us a safety briefing, explaining how the cage worked and what to expect. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as they lowered the heavy metal cage into the water. We suited up in wetsuits and masks, and one by one, climbed into the cage. The water was cold and murky, but the visibility was surprisingly good. I held onto the bars, my heart pounding with anticipation. Soon enough, the chum attracted the first shark. Seeing those massive creatures up close was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Everything was going smoothly until I noticed a strange sound. At first, it was just a faint creaking, but it quickly grew louder. I glanced up and saw the winch cable that held the cage starting to fray. Panic set in. I could hear the crew shouting from above, their voices muffled by the water. Without thinking, I pushed myself to the front of the cage and started to climb out. My hands were shaking, making it hard to grip the wet metal bars. The cage jerked violently, and I knew I had only seconds to get out. Just as I pulled myself onto the boat, the winch cable snapped completely. The cage plunged into the depths, dragged down by its own weight. I collapsed on the deck, gasping for air, my heart racing. The crew rushed over, pulling the remaining divers out of the water. Everyone was in shock, but no one was hurt. We watched in silence as the cage disappeared into the murky depths, a stark reminder of how close we had come to disaster. The boat ride back to shore was tense. The crew tried to reassure us, but we all knew how lucky we had been. When we finally docked, I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. I had faced one of my greatest fears and come out alive, but it was an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. Even now, I sometimes wake up in a cold sweat, reliving those frantic moments. The memory of that fraying cable and the plunge of the cage into the abyss is seared into my mind. It's a stark reminder of the thin line between adventure and danger, and how quickly things can go wrong. But it also taught me to respect the power of nature and the importance of staying calm in a crisis. Would I ever go shark cage diving again? Probably not. But that experience in South Africa left me with a profound sense of gratitude for my life and the precious moments we often take for granted. You guys won't believe what happened to me last summer while exploring a remote part of Mozambique. It's straight out of a nightmare, and I've been dying to share it here on Reddit. So, my friends and I are big into adventure travel, and we wanted to do something truly off the beaten path. We heard about this isolated area in Mozambique with stunning landscapes and little explored terrain. It sounded perfect for a week-long trek. We did some research, packed our gear, and hired a local guide who knew the region well. The first few days were amazing. We hiked through dense forests, crossed clear rivers, and camped under the stars. It felt like we were discovering a hidden paradise. Our guide, Paulo, was fantastic, knowledgeable, friendly, and always ready with a fascinating story about the local culture and wildlife. But on the fourth day, things took a dark turn. We had ventured deeper into the forest than planned, trying to reach a rumored waterfall that few had seen. As we were making our way through a particularly thick section of jungle, we noticed signs of human activity, makeshift huts, smoke in the distance, and strange markings on the trees. Paulo seemed uneasy but didn't say much. We decided to set up camp early and rest. That night, as we were sitting around the fire, we heard rustling in the bushes. At first, we thought it was an animal, but the sounds grew closer and more deliberate. Suddenly, Paulo stood up, looking terrified. He whispered urgently for us to put out the fire and stay quiet. The look on his face was enough to send chills down my spine. Within minutes, we were surrounded. Dozens of people emerged from the darkness, their faces painted and bodies adorned with bones and feathers. They were armed with spears and knives, and their eyes were wild with a mix of curiosity and aggression. Paulo tried to communicate with them, but they didn't seem interested in talking. Instead, they motioned for us to follow them. They led us deeper into the forest to their village, a place that looked like it hadn't changed in centuries. The atmosphere was tense, and we could feel their eyes watching our every move. We were taken to a large hut and left under guard. Paulo, looking more scared than ever, whispered that we had stumbled upon a cannibalistic tribe. My heart sank. This couldn't be real. For hours, we sat there, trying to come up with a plan. The tribe members outside were chanting and drumming, creating an eerie, oppressive atmosphere. Just when we thought all hope was lost, there was a commotion outside. The guards were distracted, and Paulo saw our chance. He signaled for us to move quickly and quietly. We slipped out of the hut and made a break for the jungle. It was a chaotic, desperate dash through the darkness. We could hear shouts behind us, but we kept running, fueled by sheer terror. Somehow, we managed to evade our pursuers and eventually found a river that Paulo recognized. We followed it until we were sure we were safe. We finally made it back to civilization, exhausted and traumatized. Paulo reported what had happened to the local authorities, but we never found out what became of the tribe. The experience left us all shaken, a stark reminder of how little we truly know about the world's hidden corners. I've had my fair share of adventures, but this one was by far the most terrifying. It taught me to respect the unknown and the importance of local knowledge. If you're ever tempted to explore the remote parts of the world, just remember that not every story ends well. Stay safe out there. You guys won't believe what happened to me last fall during a hiking trip in Alaska. I've shared some crazy stories before, but this one still gives me chills. For privacy reasons, I'll change the names of my friends. A few of my closest hiking buddies, let's call them Mike, Sarah, and John, and I decided to take a week-long trip through the remote wilderness of Alaska. We're all experienced hikers, and the untouched beauty of Alaska's vast landscapes had always been on our bucket list. We flew into Anchorage, stocked up on supplies, and set out towards Denali National Park. The first few days were everything we had hoped for: breathtaking views, clear skies, and the kind of solitude that makes you feel truly alive. On the fourth day, we decided to venture off the main trails to explore a more secluded area. Our guide, an old local named Jim, warned us about the dense forests and the dangers of getting lost, but we were confident in our skills and eager for a challenge. As we hiked deeper into the forest, the atmosphere began to change. The air grew colder, and an eerie silence settled over the trees. It felt like the forest was watching us. Around dusk, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. It looked like it had been deserted for decades, if not longer. The walls were covered in strange carvings, symbols none of us recognized. Despite feeling a bit uneasy, we decided to set up camp nearby. It seemed like a good spot to rest for the night, and the cabin offered some shelter from the cold. That night, things took a terrifying turn. I woke up to a strange humming sound. At first, I thought it was the wind, but it grew louder and more distinct. I stepped out of my tent and saw a faint, bluish light emanating from the cabin. My friends woke up too, drawn by the same unsettling noise. We grabbed our flashlights and cautiously approached the cabin. Inside, the light seemed to be coming from the carvings on the walls. They were glowing, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further, and we could see our breath in the air. Sarah screamed and pointed to the corner of the room. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure. It was translucent, barely visible, but its eyes glowed with the same eerie blue light. We stood frozen in terror as the figure moved towards us, its form flickering like a candle flame. It began to whisper, its voice echoing in our heads. The words were in a language we didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakably menacing. The figure raised its hand, and the carvings on the walls started to spin and shift, creating a vortex of light and shadow. Panic set in. We bolted out of the cabin and ran into the forest, not caring about the direction. The humming grew louder, now mixed with the sounds of whispers and distant, haunting cries. It felt like the forest itself was alive, and it was angry. We ran until we couldn't run anymore. Exhausted and terrified, we huddled together in a clearing, too scared to sleep. The night seemed endless, filled with unnatural sounds and fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures moving among the trees. By morning, the eerie noises had stopped, but the feeling of dread lingered. We made our way back to the main trail as quickly as possible, constantly looking over our shoulders. When we finally reached civilization, we told Jim what had happened. His face went pale, and he told us we had ventured into an area known to the locals as cursed, a place where spirits of the past lingered and ancient forces roamed free. I still have nightmares about that night. The memory of those glowing eyes and the whispers in the dark is something I can't shake. Alaska's wilderness is beautiful, but it's also a place of ancient mysteries and primal forces that we can't begin to understand. If you ever decide to hike in those remote areas, remember to respect the land and heed the warnings. Some places are best left undisturbed. I've been hesitant to share this experience, but maybe it's time I talk about it. Last summer, I decided to take a trip to Bolivia to challenge myself by biking the infamous North Yungas Road, better known as Death Road. It's a 40-mile stretch that descends from the high-altitude city of La Paz into the rainforest town of Coroico. The road is notorious for its sheer drops, narrow passages, and lack of guardrails. I joined a group tour with a reputable company. The day started off exhilarating, clear skies, crisp mountain air, and stunning views. As we began our descent, the adrenaline kicked in. The road was as narrow and treacherous as advertised, but I felt confident. About an hour in, the weather started to change. A thick fog rolled in, limiting our visibility. The guide warned us to keep a greater distance between bikes and to signal any stops clearly. We proceeded cautiously, but the tension was palpable. Suddenly, I heard a shout from behind. I glanced back just in time to see one of the riders lose control, his bike skidding on the loose gravel. He clipped the edge of the road and disappeared over the side. Without thinking, the rider behind him braked hard, causing her to skid and fall dangerously close to the edge. Panic surged through the group. Our guide immediately radioed for help while instructing us to move to a safer section of the road. The narrow path made it difficult to maneuver, and the fog seemed to get even denser. Small rocks began tumbling down from the slope above us, a sign that a landslide could be imminent. We huddled together at a wider spot, trying to stay calm. The guide did a head count. We were missing 2 people, the rider who went over the edge and another who hadn't caught up. Minutes felt like hours as we waited for emergency services. The realization that we were in a very remote area with limited immediate help was terrifying. Rescue teams arrived but faced the same challenges we did: poor visibility and unstable terrain. After what felt like an eternity, they informed us that they had found the bike but couldn't locate the rider due to the dangerous conditions. They would have to resume the search when it was safer. We were escorted back to La Paz, each of us grappling with shock and guilt. I couldn't shake the image of that rider disappearing into the fog. The next day, we learned that both missing riders had been found. One had suffered severe injuries but survived, while the other hadn't made it. The experience left me deeply unsettled. I had gone seeking adventure but was confronted with the stark reality of how quickly things can go wrong. The North Yungas Road is as dangerous as its nickname suggests. If you're considering biking Death Road, please weigh the risks carefully. No thrill is worth the potential cost. Some adventures are better left uncharted. Last year, I decided to fulfill a long-held dream of trekking the Annapurna Circuit in Nepal. The trail is famous for its stunning mountain scenery but also notorious for its unpredictable weather and challenging altitudes. I joined a small group of experienced hikers, and we were all eager to embark on this adventure. The first few days were everything I hoped for: breathtaking views, vibrant local cultures, and a sense of camaraderie among the group. As we ascended higher, the air grew thinner, and the terrain became more demanding. We were well prepared, or so we thought. On the day we aimed to cross the Thorongwa Pass, one of the highest points at over 5,400 meters, 17,700 feet, the weather seemed favorable. Our guides checked the forecasts and gave us the green light. Halfway through the pass, however, the weather took a sudden turn. Dark clouds rolled in, and within minutes, we were engulfed in a fierce blizzard. The wind was so strong it felt like it could knock us off the narrow trail. Visibility dropped to nearly zero, and the temperature plummeted. Our guides urged us to keep moving. Stopping could mean succumbing to hypothermia. The path was treacherous, ice forming beneath our boots. Amid the chaos, I heard a shout from behind. One of our group members had slipped and was clinging to the edge of the trail. Before anyone could reach him, he lost his grip and disappeared into the abyss below. The realization hit us hard, but there was no time to process the loss. We had to push forward to survive. Exhausted and freezing, we eventually stumbled upon a small shelter used by shepherds in milder seasons. Crammed together, we waited out the storm, which raged on for hours. Our guides tried to radio for help, but the storm disrupted all signals. When morning came, the blizzard had passed, leaving a surreal, silent landscape blanketed in snow. We made our way down to the nearest village, where we reported the incident to local authorities. A search and rescue team was dispatched, but due to the conditions, it took days to recover our fellow hiker. The experience was harrowing. I went seeking adventure and found it, but at a cost I wasn't prepared for. The mountains are as beautiful as they are unforgiving. If you're considering a trek like the Annapurna Circuit, please take every precaution. Weather and high altitudes can change rapidly, and even the best preparation can't account for everything. Always listen to your guides, monitor weather conditions closely, and understand the risks involved. Nature doesn't offer second chances. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more. If you like these stories, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have stories of your own, which you wish to share, email us at horrorshorts9685@gmail.com.